Hello, professionals. My name is Rico Aladdin, and I am the founder of Professional Launch. Today, we are continuing our AI podcast series with Anthony Molzahn. He's an entrepreneur in the community and he's well known. He has a lot of connection. You, young professionals who are launching your careers, you need to find him and connect with him and learn from him. But before we start the conversation, I have a quick message for you. Remember, Professional Lounge is a non-profit organization and we rely heavily on guests, friends, partners to keep our operation going. Now, when you support Professional Launch, what do you support? You support the development of a mentoring platform to connect college students with experienced mentors. You support our podcast where we have a professional like Anthony here on the podcast to share his knowledge with you, and you support our operation to keep us going. So we thank you so much if you are a donor. And if you are not, this is an opportunity for you to become one of our friends and support us. And follow us on social media. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and we even have a TikTok account. So you can find us and support us and follow us and, offer your opinion, ask questions, suggest a guest, and so on and so forth. We thank you so much for that. Now, on to the conversation. Anthony, welcome to Professional Lounge.
Rico, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Now, you are very well known. A lot of people know you in the community, but it's fair to say that, some of the Professional Launch audience may not know you. So say a little bit about yourself for them.
Wonderful. Yeah, I haven't met everyone yet. But my name is Anthony Molzahn. I am the CEO and co-founder of Devii, Devii, and we built a technology for software developers to write better code faster. I usually open up and I like to share, for those who may not be in the software engineering world, I like to say, imagine the phone you have in your pocket. And for every icon that you have in that pocket, it takes about 2,000 hours of software engineering time, which is some of the most expensive time at any organization, and even in today's age. And about 1,000 of those 2,000 hours to get that application ready to go with all the views, the interactions, the data flowing back and forth, to be a useful app to generate revenue. About 1,000 of those hours go into the piping that actually has the data flow back and forth from some cloud space somewhere to that phone in your pocket and back and forth. Make sure that the information is supposed to be seen by you and the things that you can change, the data that you can change is supposed to be changeable by you. Those 1,000 hours is some of the most boring, tedious, and mundane time in any engineer's effort. It's called an API, application programming interface. And what we've done is we've built something called a middleware, fancy term for software that lives in a server, that boils that 1,000 hours down to a single click.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, and it begs the question. So, what inspired you to start that company?
What inspired to start the company? Well, going back a few years, about 2 decades now. Oh, darn heckin', wow. This goes fast. My co-founder and I, we were working in the precision agriculture, ag tech industry, and we were focused on a specific part of that called remote sensing. And what we did is we worked on and built out a imagery analysis platform that took satellite, manned aircraft, and drone imagery, and we automatically converted those pictures that were being taken from space and from the aircraft and cut it out to the shape of the farmer's field within precision agriculture and automatically disseminated out to them, their agriculturists, to the machines themselves. So that way all they had to do was get in that tractor in the morning and the map that we created for them was ready to auto steer that machine to show spray this much here, fertilize this much here, water this much here, variable rate application mapping. Great for optimizations, but we were able to do an entire automation from cloud to ground. Why I bring this up is because one of the most fragmented industries for data management on the planet is agriculture, farming.
Yep.
And of course, everyone says they own the data, but everyone knows that it's the farmer that owns the data. And so we set out to make sure that that was a truth. And what we did is we said, okay, we need to talk to the satellite companies. We need to talk to all those who are flying for the high resolution imagery, the stuff that you see like on the Google Maps of the world, right? Where you actually see those images, the satellite images. We were working with the companies that took those photos, put the satellites into space. And then we help them build out and manage that API, the data transformation and translation and basis of the piping. And what we ended up finding out is every group we worked with, whether it be John Deere, Case IH, Pioneer C, doesn't matter, they all had the same problem. They needed to be able to share their data out with the world. But it takes a really, really, really long time. Those icons in your pocket I talked about, let's go 2 orders of magnitude. Let's talk 10,000 or maybe 50,000 hours of total development time for a complex system, like, say, the My John Deere API. Huge, multiple years to build this thing out. But we realized that we were doing the same thing over and over and over again. And my co-founder, he took a step back and he goes, I don't want to build an API ever again. This is like a colossal waste of every human's time. I think we can improve the human condition here just a little bit and make engineers do the work that an engineer should, right? Use the mind, practice the engineering arts rather than just the developer plug and chug. And spoiler alert, we ended up doing this. We built a middleware that automatically generated these APIs regardless of the shape and the requirements of the delivery of that data for any industry, for any data set and database on the planet. In one fell swoop, we were able to say, we no longer have to write and manage or teach massive industry that moves slower than molasses in January, but they have good intentions, to be able to help them move forward faster, get those products to market with low costs so that it saves money in ultimately the farmer's pocket. Cool. So we thought that was a pretty awesome idea. We said, I think we can solve this for the whole earth because it's in every industry problem. So we stepped away from that company. We formed Devii, and over the last 8 years, we've been building up this middleware and just going from one market, one industry to the next, and helping people solve problems and help them write better code faster.
Wonderful, man. I don't know. I have like a lot of different follow-up questions, but the podcast series today, this episode is about security and privacy and AI. So, how did the development of Devii shift your perspective on the importance of security in software development?
That might be one of the most important questions, and it's one of the primary differentiators we have within our technology is security. Anytime data moves, anytime information moves from one device to another, or even from one device's app to another app on that same device, there's this protocol that, hey, are we supposed to be able to share this information? Are we authorized to do this? Are we sure? Well, that check is incredibly complex. The security model, the security system, the engine. And what we ended up doing is taking a look at what if we actually weave in a security model into this API engine that we've created. And what we did was we said, we're going to focus on a deny by default, policy-based access control system, which is a fancy way of saying you can write rules to do really complex permissions without having to have someone or a whole team of someone's oversee all those rules to make sure we're not missing any data gaps, information getting out. We talk about those leaks. We prevent all of that. And so we recognize just how important security and safety of data and privacy of data was, that we decided to make it a central piece of our entire middleware. So what you get when you work with our tech is one of the safest and most secure and most advanced, state-of-the-art security model out there. So follow up the questions, because on the security side, we can go several directions. And we're talking AI Nation here. So
oh my goodness. So what are the biggest security challenges that you've encountered while working with AI, say, and automation?
Yes, on the AI side. So actually, I'll start with the automation side, because that one's a slightly less hard problem to solve. With automation, what you have to do is make sure that, what is automation? It's a set of process steps, right? And those process steps say to have something do a thing, and then another thing to be listening or to react to the thing, a workflow, right? And depending on the complexity of that autonomous system, will determine how many steps along the way you have to manage the security. Can this machine actually do this thing? Can that actuator move into this direction? Can we have this shipping lane have these, boxes on the back of the truck going, due west? All of those little pieces within that automated system, like supply chain in this case, um, have to be looked at very closely. And so if you take a deny by default aspect and he says nothing is granted and we have to specifically opt in absolutely every piece of this workflow, you now have a very lean process system, a business process map, if you will, that allows you to very easily determine whether or not the autonomous system is doing its job. With that, plus a good set of policy rules, you can now actually have an automated system observing the automated systems. So that was the easy problem to solve because everything's deterministic. You have an action and then something responds to it. It's a decision tree.
Mm-hmm.
On the AI side, it gets a little bit more complex because you have this entire, this vector and this graph, this large language model, several of them that are looking at, which words, which characters are supposed to be strung together in response to the characters we present as a prompt. And then it spits out something that seems logical because we said with good feedback and thumbs up that this is what we want to have feedback. But the thing is, we're humans. We have an infinite number of things we want to do with these AI models. And what you may have heard in the industry words, something like hallucination. It's a bit of a confabulation, but where a model will hallucinate. It will come up with something that doesn't exist. That's problem number one on a security standpoint, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, yes? Like,
No.
Okay, so an AI model, you can ask it to do a thing,
Okay.
right? And it says, hey, tell me when Queen Elizabeth was born. It can make up anything it wants.
Yep.
Because it's not pulling from some very specific space like a database. It's just taking the collective knowledge on what characters are supposed to be strung together, and it just, spits out an answer. It's like, I don't know, it needs a date, it needs a month, and I think it was UK, so whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's a problem when you're trying to use AI to do things like build autonomous systems or make sure you have a medical device, making the right, dosing for medications, right? Those become problems really quick when it can hallucinate. So what if you take the same approach I just talked about and you build a deterministic model? It says, hey, this model cannot do anything unless it's been specifically granted access to do so. And so that's what we've done. So AI companies out there who build agents and models, they take our tech and they weave it right into the model itself. You might have heard of like a RAG system or some file repository that it might review content ahead of time. And then it uses that as kind of like a baseline. We're going to start with this content first, and then we're going to move to the general LLM, and we'll see what else we can come up with. Well, we said, nay. Why don't we actually say, you get to look at these databases and these data sets of data, and you don't get to go anywhere else. Your facts and your truths are here, and as far as making it readable to the human, you use the LM for the rest. So that's what we focus on. Now we can guarantee the safety and the security and the privacy of every single transaction of data that moves with these agents.
Wow, this is really cool. So this is, man, I love doing this because you get to hear this explanation and it's a wow moment, right? So one thing I want to follow up on. So if you ask the machine, the systems to give you some information, and it hallucinate and go grab something from somewhere and bring it to you, has that happened? Was it corrected, or how did that happen?
The question is, you put a prompt in.
Yep.
And the way that we have instantiated the safety and security, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
So what it does is it will still do its normal process, but then it will fact check itself against the actual rows of data in the database. So you look here.
Yeah.
If Queen Elizabeth's birthday is not in this database, you can say, I don't know, I think it's this. Okay. You do not get to say that it is fact, because and that's on the query side. I'm asking for a question. I'm asking for answers.
Okay.
Well, there's another part. There's the manipulations. I want to change the information in a database. I want to change the information on the app. The whole thing we talked about earlier about moving information back and forth.
Yep.
I want to be able to speak these things into existence. My weather station at location B for this strip of road I'm paving, doing asphalt paving for. I need to be able to get a check-in every 5 minutes. So normally it's 15 minutes, but I need to talk to the machine, the weather station out there, and have it report back to me more frequently because I see some inadvertent weather coming in, and I need to know whether or not I need to bring crew number 2 on site, or if we need to wait a day for more curing time or some very specific thing, right? First, you have to have authorization. Who can do that? You have to have an interface to be able to react with it, and you have to be able to guarantee that what you put through is both correct and authorized by the person to do so. And so we guarantee those things.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, what did you decide to kind of pivot from software development to focusing on Devii and AI security, or was it a pivot, or do you still do both?
That is actually a really good question. The phrase leveraging our own technology to kind of prove out the market. We're obviously we're paving the way. We're one of just a few companies on the planet that are actually able to do this API automation. We're able to generate an entire production grade API. The 83% of the internet is made up of APIs, and most of them are not good, and they're really old.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the white space on the internet, the piping underneath the roadways of the internet, a lot of those are rusted. That's where all the hacks come in. People plug in their own pipes into those old rusty pipes because no one's watching them. We took a different approach and said, let's make it all clean and shiny. Let's have less pipes, by the way. Let's make sure that they are all squeaky clean and easy to monitor. And what we did is every application we were commissioned to build. So we built learning management systems. We've built point of sale and inventory management systems for buy-sell trade. We've built really complex geospatial information systems for golf course turf health management, for agriculture, across the board. I could go on, but the important part here is every time we picked up a piece of software to develop with our local, regional, or international partners, we did it so that way we can both improve and deploy our middleware. We need to expand our middleware to do X. Well, this group out here has this problem. We haven't finished that, so we prioritize on our roadmap of development. We need to do these things with our own technology. Well, now we're going to get a new customer using our technology. We're solving their problem. They have a budget to be able to build out this application. And now we become, just accidentally, a subject matter expert, or at least quasi, in that space. And now we can both promote and help them, as well as showcase a case study of what our technology can do. Because we do meta technology. We wrote code that writes code that generates APIs. So how do you sell that in the market? I mean, this isn't even like you're not selling the car in the parking lot. You're not even selling the manufacturing facility that makes the cars. You're selling the components that can make up the scaffolding and the framework to make a car manufacturing facility or a bakery. It doesn't matter. We're meta in that way, and so we can solve any industry's problem. Our technology is intended for scaffolding.
Well, I think you kind of touch on my next question a little bit, because I was going to ask, how does Devii specifically enhance security for API developments compared to traditional methods?
This might be my favorite question because those who actually are in the API management space, which is an industry, Gartner, is growing really fast. It's growing like 30% plus CAGR every single year. I mean, it is insane. But there's also the data science platform management market, which is on a path to 1.8 trillion over the next decade. It's just ridiculous. Also growing at just breakneck speed. And so you have two markets that are growing rapidly on the need to be able to interface with complex and more complex, day by day, data sets for a more nuanced need between an expanding set of diverse user types, right? It's no longer just one or two different user types, an admin and a user logging into a system. You have perhaps a litany. You might have 15 different groups that need access to certain parts of data within an environment. Well, that's not easy to manage and maintain. So these entire, Microsoft, for instance, has something that used to be called Active Directory, and it would just set up your email, users, your permissions, what controls you could have with different apps in the universe. That's a beast to manage and maintain. So we said, well, everyone seems to punt on security from the API standpoint, the people who make API tooling like us. And we said, what if we actually flipped it on its head and we decided to focus purely on a security-first API layer where this is how we're running things. We're not calling it a standard, but we're definitely making sure that we provide the absolute best tooling for security out there, so that way others hopefully fall in the line. And it turns out our competitors actually come to us now and they're like, "Wow, how'd you do that?" So it's pretty. It's like, well, sign this NDA and we'll tell you a little more, or better yet, a partnership.
Wonderful, wonderful. Before we go to the next part of the conversation, I have a reminder for you. If you enjoy the content from the guests that we are bringing on the podcast, we invite you to see how you can support the Professional Lunch podcast so that we can be able to bring some of the fantastic guests like Anthony here on the podcast today. So we thank you for your support. Remember, it's not even though Giving Hearts is done, you can still donate to Professional Lunch on the Giving Hearts platform to help us with our organization and help us developing our mentoring platform and also support our podcast. We thank you for your support. Now we're going to talk about AI security and risk and threats. Okay, so what are the most common security threats AI system face today?
Well, straight up, when you want to connect some application or program to an AI agent, if you're not thinking about the security portion of this first, you have just given a very high octane model access to be able to manipulate an application interface, like an actual app that you play around with, a database, an entire organization structure. We talk about IT, like security from database to doorknob. I mean, you put an agent inside without any guardrails, I mean, you're asking for trouble. And even if you were to isolate it within the organization itself, because that's a good thing to do, you still have this, we'll call it well, not a rogue agent, but an agent that has the freedom to move about the proverbial cabin. And it can do whatever it pleases. So, of course, you want to make sure that you lock that down and give it specific permissions. Okay. So that's just on the, like, hey, just, belt and suspenders, just check your permissions at the door and make sure if you're going to use some AI, whether it be internal or whether it be leveraging a model out there, whether it be DeepSeek AI, Anthropic, whatever, doesn't matter, right? Let's take the real world example: the European Union, the EU. I think something like less than 8% of organizations in the EU are using AI right now. It's because of the regulations that they have, and so we are kicking off a project focused on creating the first, we'll call it an AI marketplace that allows and follows the regulations of the EU, so companies can above board use AI for an entire organization. It means that they have safe access to and a guarantee that the data doesn't leave their organization, so it can start training on all the files and the infrastructure. Because what's the problem that we face within companies? We're really good at really quickly putting information somewhere, whether it be Slack or SharePoint or wherever, but to be able to recall this information. I think you had Courtney Jensen, executive director from UND at one point. She might have talked about this too. To be able to recall the data, it's a pain in the buns.
Yeah.
Like, where did I put that file? Was it version 2 or 6, right? And what ends up happening is if you're able to train an AI agent internally to be able to recall that information for you, now you can have a conversation with your entire repository of your company's organizational data. Even for a startup, that can be absolutely critical. I need this contract and I need to call it up. Are there any gaps that need to be filled? Is there any versions of this document somewhere else that exist that cover those considerations, so that I have a master service agreement that I can actually work with an enterprise company somewhere else on the planet? Those things are absolutely critical. But when you get to scale, some of the largest European Union organizations, they need access to files that might be 10, 15 years out, but they have to store them for posterity, among other things. Audit trails. Oh boy. So if you can guarantee that the data doesn't leave the, we'll call them the digital walls of the organization, and certainly doesn't leave the digital walls of the country or the territory, you now have something that is on the path towards an EU savvy, an EU capable, regulated system that allows the adoption of safe AI with a security first mindset.
Wow. So that begs the question, right? So can AI system or can this system be manipulated or exploited by hackers? And if so, um, how how do you guys prevent that from happening? What are some of the strategies you use to prevent this?
Yeah, that is an age-old question, and it happens at every layer of the software development stack. So it's not just with AI agents. Anytime you're working with, say, open source data, there is always the possibility of a nefarious actor stepping in and putting some little snippet of code inside some library or some piece of function or program that you're using to make your application work. The AI model
Yeah.
is no different. And it's not about preventing hacks necessarily. It's about assuming that it's going to happen and making sure that you take precautions to prevent those things from ever entering your workspace in the first place. And so just assume that it's going to be. There are nefarious actors, and for every advancement that we have seen out there on the news over the last few years, imagine that there's just as many advancements that we don't hear about that are the antithesis, that are the evil component, a counterpart to all of the good things that we're seeing in the advancements that we're making with these models.
Mm-hmm. So, what what role does Devii play in mitigating threats like data breaches and unauthorized access?
Yeah. So as I talked about the security model and weaving that in, so the pipe itself is now observed both by our policy system, but also because the output of our technology creates a single pipe as opposed to traditionally the way that APIs are developed is there's one pipe for every single type of thing that needs to be done.
Okay.
I need to update my username. I need to update my password. I need to update my address. That might be 3 to 6 or more separate pipes. And that's a pretty simple thing that most apps do, right?
Mm-hmm.
There can be 1,000 or 10,000 of these pipes going for even just a modest size application that you might have downloaded on your phone. We have boiled it down to a single pipe, regardless of the complexity of what you need to do with the data and how you need to move it around. So now you have, imagine the bodyguard just looking at one pipe. Yep, it's good to go. No leaks. We're good to go. Now you have telemetry and observability that is simple, straightforward, fast to implement, and easy to maintain. That's great for software engineers because they have less to think about there. But then you also have a security model that also focuses on making sure that that pipe is having the right stuff move through it. So belt and suspenders. So our job is to be kind of the observability behavioralist, because making sure people are doing the good thing. As I think, the folks at Kirkwall, I think you're connecting with Ujjal at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Will, the founder, says they keep robots in their best behavior. We basically keep, data going to the right place. We keep data and the people who are interfacing with it on their best behavior.
Wonderful. Yeah, I interviewed Will Kumardi last, I think, 2 years ago. He came on the podcast also.
Good.
CEO Kirkland. Yeah.
Good.
So that was a great one of my favorite, one of my most favorite episodes. So.
Good.
All right. So next segment, we're going to talk about data privacy and protection. But before we go into that segment, I want to remind Professional Lunch audience that today, this episode of Professional Lunch is provided is brought to you in part by the Failstone Group. We thank them for their support. They have been a great supporter of Professional Lunch. We thank them for their support. Now, data privacy and protection. So, what are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to securing AI-generated data?
Okay. So if I understand this question, it is I have used some type of model to provide me content, whether it be text or images, video, right?
Yeah.
And the question is, how do I guarantee the sovereignty, safety, security, and privacy of that output? So on the output side, just like you would when you're creating any piece of tech, when you're having any piece of tech provide some type of output, what do you do with it? You store it somewhere, whether it be database file, Google storage, whatever. So same as always. But I think maybe what you're touching on is I am putting files into a part of my prompt. I'm uploading these documents to, have it review that as a part of its research, to provide an answer with that as a part of its context. In that case, that really comes down to how your company operates. Is this a model that you have put onto your own machines within your own organization? Going back to that EU thing, now we've quashed that issue because now it stays all internal. There are models, and I think if you haven't done so already, chip.ai, Scott Meyer, I think he'd be a good one to come on here. He talks a lot about the security model management and what you do with files. Yeah, they built a AI agent marketplace.
Okay.
It's kind of neat.
I think we are connected on LinkedIn, but
Good,
yeah.
good. Yeah, he's one of the good ones. In that case, you need to look at what the application, like OpenAI, ChatGPT, what does it say it does with the files that you upload on a particular prompt? There are settings where you can prevent it from having those files be used to improve the model itself. So there are steps you can take, but ultimately you need to look at how sensitive is the information that I'm using, where is the agent that I'm interfacing with, where does it live, and what are the chances of this information getting out, and of course, what's the risk assessment, what's the criticality of it getting out there, right? Social security numbers is one thing, pay, wages, salary is another thing.
TOB.
But yeah, your research for getting technical readiness level 8 and 9, and you're ready to sell your content to one of the large defense contractors. But that information gets up, you just spoil the eggs, right?
Yeah. So that begs the question. I mean, how does Devii handle sensitive user data to ensure privacy and compliance with regulations?
I'm trying not to get technical on some of this stuff, but like, there's a technical answer.
Yeah.
But so what we're really talking about is file handling or file management.
Okay.
So just like you do when you are sharing a file, like SharePoint, Google Drive, whatever, right? OneDrive. Right? You can say who can see it within that online cloud folder structure, and perhaps for how long, right? Or what they can do with it. They can view this Word document, they can't edit it. Right? Okay, it goes back to the whole policy system, which is extremely complex without even trying in a traditional model. Well, where we come in is we've actually been able to take that type of granular care on not just who can see what file and what they can do with it, but depending on the conditions of the rest of the organization, certain things need to be met in order for access to be granted. A real world example, not necessarily a file, we can call it a file. I am a security officer at a warehouse manufacturing facility. So long as I am logged in and I am clocked in and I am within the geofence, I'm within the boundary perimeter based on my GPS coordinates, I have access to the west warehouse door hangar 2, and I open that and I can now interface with the IoT devices, turn the lights, start the machines, do XYZ. If any of those conditions are not met, then I don't have access to open the door, turn the lights, work with the machinery equipment, right? Deny by default. Take that same approach with files. So long as this person is inside the building, it's during working hours, they've clocked in and they have an actual job task in, say, like one of their Kanban or Jira boards that says that they can do this particular thing, they have access to these files so long as that ticket is open and that the manager's on site. That stuff can become very easy with our technology. And these are the things that become cost prohibitive on management of sensitive data at scale.
Wow. I guess that's... So
I can give you the technical answer. I tried to skirt around it.
I know. So how can developers design AI models that respect user privacy without, what's the word, compromising performance?
Yeah. Oh, you in a good space. You in a good. That's the speed is an absolute key to all of this, right? Because the more complex the structures are, how much you're asking the model to review, the number of tokens, the depth of its context requirements can actually affect, how much does it need to store and for how long, right? So let's skip that part for a second because I'll just go on an AI trail there. But I think I mentioned before we started today, a dear friend of ours, Jace Kraft, the CTO, co-founder of Pavewise, he likes to do side hustles because engineers the good ones, they just follow them, watch what they do, because they just, I mean, just gold nugget after gold nugget.
Yeah.
And one of the technologies he built as an IP on top of ours is called the NL API, Natural Language API. You can have a conversation with your data. You can talk and speak to your data, and you can query it, and you can manipulate it just by having a conversation. And it takes our security model into place. So everything I talked about all the way through now, imagine the interface is a conversation. And now you can manage these things at scale. So I think, so ask the question again now with this context. I'm prompting you.
Yeah, man, that was good. Um, so, what's your take on balancing data collection for AI training while maintaining the user's privacy?
Okay, so if I understand this, the when we are training a model,
Mm-hmm.
or any organization or individual is training a model, which actually doesn't happen as often
Yeah.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, well, it's going to come. We are now seeing the next iteration. So LLM is something, large language model.
Mm-hmm.
We're now starting to see something called SLMs, small language models.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So the whole EU thing, or company organization, I'm going to train a model that is focused on all the files and infrastructure that we have within our organization. That doesn't require the billions and billions of parameters.
Mm-hmm.
It requires a lot less. And it can lean on an existing model. It's like DeepSeek refined. And you now can take these training data sets, and you can now curate which things need to be called and which things need to be called and pulled forward and collated based on your organization's structure and needs for data recollection. So you now have more granular control. So I think if you're talking about the balance of training data, that's privacy, like putting that data and files into the model itself, that might be private PII, private, personal identifiable information.
Mm-hmm.
If you can guarantee that it doesn't go out the door, the proverbial door of your organization, you've quashed that problem, and now you've been able to focus on building an SLM to serve your team's needs.
Okay. Well, that's good. So, hmm, I know. I have I work on this. I do my whole research trying to do, but I'm trying to find the follow up questions. Yeah, and as I'm hearing this thing, because technology is such a fascinating and yet complex thing when you're listening to some of these for the first time. And so, what are some of the approaches to securing AI system that developers should be aware of?
Yeah, actually, I think we've talked about a lot of the data, the privacy, the structure of information, the behind the scenes stuff,
Mhm.
or in other words, the back end.
Yeah.
The part where the sausage is made, right?
Yeah.
In an organization or in an application. But there's the front end, the
Mhm.
part that we actually see and play around with. Ultimately, it's what it has capabilities of doing, which views you see. You see the user update information page. You see an admin portal. You see, the apps that you use, the interfaces, the interactions. All of those are your visual conduits
Mhm.
to interfacing with the data, everything we've talked about so far, including the AI agents. So we actually have a partnership, an international partner, Pixel Free Studios, who has actually created a deterministic front-end automation tool. So I talked about those 2,000 hours.
Mhm.
We boiled down the 1,000 of those hours down to a single click.
Yep.
They've boiled the other 1,000 hours down to a single click. So our combined solution, you can actually build out, say, like a Figma design, and it can automatically generate and build a database that matches the views and the shape. Our technology will build a policy and a security structure around it,
Mhm.
and provide those hooks to make the interface that was simply designed by someone with a Figma project. And it can bring it to life in native code, download it to your app inside 5 minutes.
Wow. Yeah,
Yes.
that sounds pretty
Yes.
cool.
So the front end. So really, what I'm getting at is being able to have a deterministic front end that says this is specifically the things that we wanted to do, and then we have a policy that matches it. So now you can think a data first application, architecture, rather than looking at I need to build it for API, or I need to build it for the front end, or I need to build it for the back end. You can now says, what's the shape of the data in my database, or what's the shape of the database supposed to be? Let's go with that, because that's the source of truth, and the shape of it is the one that has been set up for speed, optimization, culling information quickly, and being able to manipulate it without error.
Wow. So, I this question I was about to ask it to you before, but how can AI developers anticipate and prepare for zero-day vulnerabilities, or can they do that?
What's the question?
Okay, so how can AI developers anticipate and prepare for zero vulnerabilities?
Oh.
Yeah. Is that even possible?
I think the correct answer at this point is that you shall assume that that can never, ever, ever happen. There is always going to be a vulnerability, and you better prepare. My dad used to sell supplemental insurance at some point, the door to door. It's better to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it.
Yep.
Same goes here. Put the belt and suspenders on, walk out the door knowing that you are protected, and carry the umbrella, for crying out loud. You may not need it, but you got a car, you can put it away. Always have the security and the safety. Bring your umbrella, even if you don't think you'll ever need it, even if it's an internal app. We're getting to a point now, and I think this is really where I see the industry going in the world of AI, this agentic nation that we've got, this agentic universe, is we now are capable of, one, separating the data itself, the data structures, from the applications, which means I have the information. I want to access the information as a user, but I don't want to work with that interface. I'm not an engineer. I want to play with that data from that application, this data from this other application, and a litany of 15, 16 other applications. I want to pull those all together, and I want to create an application for myself for a target market of one. And that is now possible. I can manage the temperature on my toaster and make sure I can start my car in the morning. I can build an app for that if I want to. That might only be useful for one person.
Yeah.
And that is totally fine, right? Because it serves their needs, and that's what we're getting at, is we need to have a marketplace where we can have the safety and security of the data that has been teased apart from the actual interfaces themselves. SaaS model, people say, like Satya says, it's all going away. Well, kind of. It is in this traditional sense where you build this big platform,
Yeah.
and then it serves a specific wide set of needs.
Yeah.
HubSpot's a great example. It has 1,000 things it can do. I only need it for like 3 things, but I have 5 other applications that I need those 3 things for.
Yeah.
I want to build an app that serves those needs for me, because I don't need all of the HubSpot or these other tools. Now is the time where I can actually feasibly do that for myself as well as for an organization.
Wonderful, wonderful. So the next part of the conversation, we'll talk a little bit about AI, ethical consideration when it comes to security and privacy. But before we do go into that part of the conversation, I want to remind everyone that Professional Launch is a nonprofit organization, and we rely heavily on guests and friends and partners to keep our operation to continue to serve young professionals who are launching their careers. If you are not a friend of Professional Launch, if you have not donated to Professional Launch, we invite you to do so. And guess what? You can still donate on Giving Hearts, the platform, and just find Professional Launch on there and continue to support us. We thank you so much. Now, my next question is: how important is transparency when it comes to AI security and privacy?
Transparency, maybe a real world example, or maybe expand on the question, because we can go 1,000 ways there.
Okay, so let's go the first way. I mean, if we can go 1,000, that means we can pick and choose. What would be the first answer to that?
Okay, so the question is regarding the transparency of where the information is coming from when interfacing with a particular model.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that we see now is it goes through, and a lot of these agents will log what they're doing in the order that they do it in. They'll say, here's what I'm going to do. Then they log what they are doing, what sites they pull the information from, and the references of where that information is deriving. That's all public facing information. So it's now using the internet to be able to, again, cull and collate the information in a way that makes sense to respond to your question. So on the transparency side, I think this is the best thing that we could do, because we now can self-assess and verify, even if we're not a subject matter expert, that someone else who's written something. Now, the danger is that if that content that it's pulling from is also written by AI, now we get into this really interesting thing that whole website was built by AI. It perhaps may say whatever it wants. It may not be truth, but it had a great SEO, and so it shows up on the list. The model finds it, and it responds in kind, doing its very best based on the information that was presented based on search rankings. Okay, so from a transparency standpoint, being able to see what those references are, full transparency, do your fact checking, look at those links to make sure that what you had responded, if you're not a subject matter expert in that space, dude, do your homework.
Do you think AI developers can assure that AI systems operate fairly without bias while maintaining security? Do you think that's a possibility?
That is a complex question, but I think when we look at a particular business process map, I am achieving these particular things. I think in any process map, you can. Heuristics and behaviors, those techniques, they're going to take root. And what the model was trained on, none of them have a full repository of all human knowledge. And even if there's always going to be a bias on how much content of a particular topic has been presented. So there is, again, just like assume that you're never safe, belt and suspenders, never assume that there is not bias. There will always be bias. So having a clear path and understanding as a developer and engineer, what is my goal and my objective? What are my process steps? What am I trying to do with the data? And what am I trying to turn it into and to serve what need? If I know what that flow is, I can whittle out, and I can basically part the sea and only focus on having responses come back to me that are both unbiased and serve the business process steps along the way. Otherwise, the action, that workflow, fails because it did not present the information back in an unbiased fashion, which is a requirement of the process map.
My next question might be a little. I might get into some hot water for this one, but what does
42?
What will the governments, and even the industry standards play in shaping, AI security protocols, to ensure safety of and privacy of users? Well, I warned you at first.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Let me take a moment. So first, I'm not a world organization, nor do I represent any agency of that standpoint.
Yep.
I will say that the most responsible thing, what is a government? It is of the people for the people. That's the intention. It is to represent the body of the people. And knowing that, again, that process map, right? What is it that the constituents want? If there is a consensus or a majority that says we need this regulation, you follow those steps.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a top-down approach where some AI czar says we got to do it this way or else. I think it comes from the people that says we need these things because we have these concerns, or this will help us move forward faster, or this will improve our human condition. So my response is let the regulation be built up from the people themselves. It will take longer, but that marination time is so critically important to having a responsible AI regulation that can be adopted at scale.
Okay. Do you mean let the people, the users, people who are using the AI models, right?
Let's just assume humans.
Okay.
all several billion of us.
Okay.
Right? And all the devices that are connected to it, North Dakota is in session right now, and they have actually been using, at least to some degree, um, model interface to be able to read through all of the bills that are being proposed, looking at the Sentry code, what's there, to deconflict anything. Well, this bill is here, but our Sentry code says this.
Mhm.
Well, this is a contradiction. So now we need to do these things in this order. We need to have these resolutions in place. That is actually helping us deconflict. So in this case, I think it's useful because uh, these legislators are being paid, not very well, but they're being paid, and those are coming from the dollars of the people who they're representing.
Yep.
And what their job there to do is to pass rules, regulations, laws that are in alignment with the people that are paying them to make sure those laws get in place and that there are no contradictions. So I think in this case, using AI and the regulation of it starts with using it as an observability tool to help augment the processes of bureaucracy. Let's start there.
Okay.
Let's make it so that 12,000 page policy that sits on the desk of every senator in Congress, that they're able to responsibly say, I know what this is, and we all have consensus because we have been able to get the TLDR. And if we need to boil into it, we know exactly how to have a conversation with this 12,000 page document.
Wonderful. So, and my next question is a two-part question. But first, I have to remind you that this organization, Professional Launch, the podcast, what we do is about helping young professionals to launch their careers. And so we are talking about AI security and privacy today. The first part of the question is, what advice would you give to developers and business leaders navigating the complexity of AI security and privacy?
Don't use AI for the sake of using it as a promotional tool. Have a reason. Let's start there.
Okay.
And I say that because my follow-up is everybody should absolutely be using AI to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
As a developer, as an engineer, having that hat on, I believe that it is one of the most useful things that can help us speed along and reduce errors. A lot of times we talk about security and privacy and data leaks and things like that. Those happen because of generally of human error, or some fatigued engineer has been going for 26 hours straight, is on his 19th Red Bull, is like, all right, let's do this last Git pull request, let's go. And then he zonks up for 2 days and he pushes it up, and all of a sudden we've got a CrowdStrike on our hands. Oh boy. Right? We can avoid that.
Yeah.
That can be avoided if we have a responsible implementation. So I'd say don't use it just to have those 2 letters added to your title or name, or don't just use it to use it. Use it because you have a specific need, and use it as your guardrails and your own policy behavior management system.
Wonderful, wonderful. So now the other part of the question is really, what advice would you give to a college students right now who's listening to this podcast, and where we were talking about AI? Because now, just last week, I had William Gruby. He's the founder of Groovy Education on the podcast, and this week we are posting him. And he said that if young professionals put AI knowledge or knowing AI on their resume, they have a leg up, or something to that matter, to that effect, right? And so, knowing what you know now about AI, how AI is very useful for developers and also for businesses and what have you, what advice would you give to college students who are trying to launch their careers?
I will double down on William's statement and say, not only do you put that on your resume, but you show examples. You build a portfolio of all of the things and showcase what you have done. Who cares how small it is? It doesn't matter if you use it to update the resume that has the information that says you can use AI. Go for it and talk about it. You want to talk about transparency? Talk about it. Because very quickly, you're applying for a job. Workforce demand is huge. Everyone needs people working in their companies now. That is not going away, and AI is only closing the gap. It is not going to put it upside down. It's just we don't have enough humans. We have way too much that the human civilization is asking to do.
Yeah.
So we're fine. We really are. So for the companies that these college students are applying for, if they feel that they will not be well received with the AI expertise or experience on the resume, that's not the company you want to work for, because that's the company that is going to be swapped out for some automation. If they do not oblige and evolve their own internal AI structure, we talked about this whole time, that particular company is going to fall to the wayside, and leave room for, especially if they're the incumbent, leave room for someone else to take its stead, take its place. And so this also helps people who are looking for jobs find the right culture fit right away. This is what I do. Oh my God, you do this? It's amazing.
Yeah.
We've actually been looking for this. We don't have a title for it, but we do have this budget. I know it's not what you're asking for. It's a little bit more, but we're hoping that you can help us with this because we've never done it before. Oh, of course, absolutely. And now you have created a job security. You have perhaps invented a position just by showing that you have this particular expertise that this organization desperately needs. And you walked in the door and you gave them everything. You managed up without even knowing it. How darn heckin' great is that?
That sounds amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So the podcast is about people, about careers, about people launching their careers. But I'd like to know a little something about the man himself. So tell us a little something that somebody who worked with you, somebody in your network wouldn't normally know about you.
Okay. Well, once people get to know me, I think they find it